The warning lights painted Commander Park Ji-ho's face red as he stared at the dying systems display. The colony ship New Seoul groaned around him like a wounded animal. Somewhere in the engine room, another power coupling had just failed. That made 17 in the past hour. "Sir, we have maybe 6 hours of life support left," reported Engineer Lee Minho over the comm system. His voice carried the weight of a man who had been working for 3 straight days without sleep. "The reactor is holding together with prayer and spare wire." Ji-ho closed his eyes for a moment. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. Navigation Officer Yoon Tae-jin plotted course corrections on a screen that flickered every few seconds. Communications Officer Shin Woo-jin monitored distress frequencies that had been empty for weeks. 50,000 souls depended on the decisions made on this bridge. 50,000 refugees who had already lost everything when the Vektari Empire burned their colonies. Men, women, children who had trusted him to find them safety among the stars. "There," Tae-jin said suddenly, pointing at his display. "Kepler Station. It's only 4 hours away at our current speed." Ji-ho moved to look over the navigator's shoulder. Kepler Station appeared as a small dot on the long-range sensors. It was a Rilani station, he knew. The aquatic aliens were famous throughout this sector for their neutrality and their beautiful coral cities that grew in the depths of their ocean worlds. "Send a distress signal," Ji-ho ordered. Shin Woo-jin's fingers danced across his console. "Signal sent, sir. We're requesting emergency docking and humanitarian aid." The reply came faster than expected. A melodic voice filled the bridge, speaking accented but clear human standard. "New Seoul, this is Kepler Station. I am Kil Hana, Human Diplomatic Liaison. We have received your distress call. Please transmit your passenger manifest and medical status immediately." Relief flooded through Ji-ho. A human voice meant someone who would understand their situation. "Ms. Kil, this is Commander Park Ji-ho. We have 50,000 refugees aboard. Our ship is failing and we need immediate assistance." A long pause followed. When Kil Hana spoke again, her voice was strained. "Commander, I need to speak with the Rilani Council. Please maintain your current heading and reduce speed to minimum. We will contact you within 30 minutes. The next 30 minutes felt like hours. In the medical bay, Dr. Kim Sora treated patients with supplies that were running dangerously low. Children cried in the corridors while their parents tried to comfort them with words that rang hollow. Everyone knew they were dying slowly in the cold of space. Resource Manager Choi Dae-ho appeared on the bridge with his daily report. His face was grim as always these days. "Food supplies will last another week if we cut rations again. Water recycling is at 92% efficiency, but the filters are failing. We need those replacement parts soon or we'll start losing people to dehydration." Ji-ho nodded. Every day brought new problems, new shortages, new reasons why tomorrow might be their last. The Vektari had been thorough when they destroyed the human colonies. They had not just taken the worlds. They had hunted down every escape ship, every refugee convoy. The New Seoul was one of the few that had managed to slip away into deep space. "Sir, incoming transmission from Kepler Station," Shin Woo-jin announced. "Put it through." Kil Hana's voice returned, but now she sounded tired and worried. "Commander Park, I have spoken with Council Leader Veltara. The situation is complicated. The Rilani are willing to help, but they fear Vektari retaliation. If they aid human refugees, they risk bringing the Empire's anger upon their people." "I understand their concerns," Ji-ho replied carefully. "But we have children aboard who will not survive another day without proper medical care. We're not asking for weapons or military support. We just need a chance to repair our ship and resupply." Another pause. Ji-ho could imagine the discussion taking place on the station. The Rilani were peaceful people who had managed to stay neutral in galactic conflicts for centuries. Helping human refugees would end that neutrality forever. "Commander," Kil Hana said finally, "Council Leader Veltara has agreed to grant you emergency docking rights. Bay 7 is being prepared for your arrival. However, I must warn you that this decision was not unanimous. Some council members fear this will bring disaster upon our people." "Thank you," Ji-ho said. and meant it with every fiber of his being. "We will not forget this kindness." The new soul limped toward Kepler Station like a broken bird seeking shelter. As they drew closer, Jiho could see the station's unique architecture through the viewports. The Rilani built their structures to mimic the coral reefs of their homeworld. Curved walls flowed into organic shapes that seemed to grow rather than having been constructed. Docking was a nightmare. The ship's maneuvering thrusters were barely functional, and Lee Minho had to reroute power from life support to make the final approach. For 10 terrifying minutes, the lights dimmed throughout the ship as every available watt went to the engines. But they made it. The new soul settled into Bay 7 with a shudder that ran through every deck. Jiho felt the artificial gravity stabilize as the station's systems took over from their failing generators. "All departments report status," Jiho ordered. "Medical teams are already moving critical patients to the station's hospital," Dr. Kim Sora reported. "The Rilani medical staff is standing by to assist. Food supplies are being transferred from station storage," added Choi Daeho. "Clean water is flowing into our reserves. Engine repairs can begin as soon as the Rilani technicians arrive," Lee Minho said. "They have the parts we need." For the first time in months, Jiho allowed himself to hope. They were safe. The Rilani had risked everything to help strangers, and it had saved 50,000 human lives. 3 days later, that hope turned to ashes. The Vektari fleet arrived without warning. 12 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace and surrounded Kepler Station. Their commander's message was brief and brutal. "Rilani scum, you have harbored human terrorists. Surrender them immediately or face the consequences." Council leader Veltura's reply was calm despite the death surrounding his people. "The humans are refugees seeking humanitarian aid. They have committed no crimes against your empire. Harboring enemies of the Vektari Empire is treason. You have 5 minutes to comply." Those 5 minutes stretched into eternity. On the bridge of the New Soul, Jiho watched the tactical display as the Vektari ships powered their weapons. The station had no military defenses. The Rilani had built Kepler Station as a place of peace, not war. "Sir," Shin Woo-jin said quietly, "the Rilani are ordering all ships to evacuate immediately. They're opening the docking bay doors." "Council leader Veltara to all human vessels," came the transmission. "Go now. Take our blessing and remember us well. May your children find the peace that has been denied to ours." The New Soul launched. Just as the first Vektari energy beam struck the station, Jiho stood frozen on the bridge, watching through the rear cameras as the beautiful coral structures began to crack and burn. The Rilani had chosen to face certain destruction rather than hand over their guests. Within an hour, Kepler Station was nothing but debris and memories. The Vektari ships had been thorough, ensuring that no Rilani survived to tell tales of human cowardice. As the New Soul fled into the darkness between stars, Jiho gathered his senior staff in the conference room. His voice was steady when he spoke, but his eyes burned with something that had not been there before. "The Rilani gave their lives so we could live," he said. "They asked for nothing in return except that we remember them. I make this promise before all of you as witnesses. A debt to humans is never left unpaid. We will remember the Rilani. We will honor their sacrifice. And someday, when we have the power to do so, we will ensure that their kindness is repaid 1,000 times over." Every person in that room nodded solemnly. They had witnessed something precious die for their sake. That debt would follow them through the years ahead, a weight on their souls, and a purpose in their hearts. The New Soul disappeared into the void, carrying 50,000 refugees and one sacred promise into an uncertain future. 10 years passed like a long dream filled with danger and wonder. The New Soul was no longer alone in the darkness between stars. What had started as one dying ship had grown into a fleet of 50 vessels, each one carrying a piece of humanity's. Future Commander Park Jiho stood in the observation deck of the New Soul, now renamed the Kepler's memory in honor of their fallen saviors. His hair had turned gray at the temples and lines marked his face from years of difficult decisions. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field called Haven's Rest stretched in all directions, hiding their ships among millions of floating rocks. "Sir, the morning reports are ready," said Chief Navigator Unpaid. He had changed too over the years. The nervous young officer had become steady and confident, his skills at finding safe routes through dangerous space now legendary among the fleet. Jiho nodded and accepted the datapad. 50 ships, each with its own purpose and crew. The engineering vessels worked constantly to keep everything running. The agricultural ships grew food in impossible gardens that floated in zero gravity. The hospital ships cared for the sick and injured from a dozen different species that had joined them over the years. "Any word from our scouts?" Jiho asked. "Captain Nam Ji-hyun reports from the outer spiral. She's found 3 more refugee groups hiding in the Vega Nebula. They're asking for protection from Vektari patrols," Taijin replied. Jiho smiled slightly. Nam Ji-hyun had started as a junior pilot 10 years ago. Now she commanded one of their fastest scout ships and had a reputation for finding people who needed help. The refugees always seemed to trust her immediately. "Tell her to bring them home," Jiho said. "We have room." That was how humanity had grown in the darkness. Not by conquest or expansion, but by becoming a beacon for the lost and hopeless. Word spread through the galaxy's underground networks about the human fleet that never turned away refugees, never asked for payment, and somehow always had enough supplies to share. The communications room buzzed with activity as always. Officer Shin Woo-jin had built a network that spanned half the galaxy, connecting refugee groups, resistance cells, and anyone else who opposed the Vektari Empire. His encrypted messages passed through relay stations hidden in dead systems and forgotten moons. "We're getting reports from 17 sectors today," Woo-jin said when Jiho visited the comm center. "The Vektari are having trouble in the Andromeda region. 3 colonies have gone dark and their patrol fleets are spread too thin to investigate." "Internal problems?" Jiho asked. "Looks like it. Our sources say the Empire is fighting rebellions on a dozen fronts. They're strong enough to crush any single uprising, but they can't be everywhere at once." Jiho filed that information away. Intelligence was precious in their nomadic life. Knowledge of enemy movements meant the difference between safety and destruction for 50,000 souls. In the hydroponics bay of the agricultural ship Green Dream, Bae-Sumin tended to plants that shouldn't exist. She had spent years learning to grow crops in conditions that would kill normal vegetation. Her tomatoes thrived in radiation fields. Her grain grew in soil made from asteroid dust and recycled waste. "The new strain is ready for testing," she told Dr. Kim Sora during their weekly meeting. "These carrots can grow in almost pure nitrogen atmosphere, perfect for the Zephyrian refugees we picked up last month." Dr. Sora nodded approvingly. She had become more than just a doctor over the years. Her medical knowledge now covered 23 different alien species. Her teams could treat injuries and diseases that would baffle the best physicians in civilized space. "The Zephyrians are adapting well," Sora said. "Their mechanical bodies are fascinating. They don't need organic food, but they appreciate the gesture. It shows them we care about their comfort, not just their survival." That was the secret of humanity's success in the void. They didn't just rescue refugees and outcasts, they made them family. Every ship in the fleet contained multiple species working together, sharing knowledge and skills that made them all stronger. In the engineering section of the factory ship Iron Will, Lee Min-ho studied salvaged Vektari technology with a team of human and alien scientists. His workshop looked like chaos to untrained eyes, but every piece of equipment served a purpose in his grand design. "Look at this power coupling," he said to his assistant, a crystalline being called Keth who communicated through color changes. "The Vektari built it to last exactly 100 years, then fail catastrophically, planned obsolescence on a massive scale." Keth flashed orange, which meant curiosity in his species' language. "But if we modify the quantum matrix here," Min-ho Wei continued, adjusting microscopic components with tools that bent reality, "we can make it regenerate instead of degrade, a power source that grows stronger over time." That was typical of human engineering. Where other species saw limits, humans saw opportunities. Every piece of salvaged technology became the foundation for something better. Their ships ran on impossible engines that turned space dust into fuel, and converted enemy weapons fire into shield energy. The tactical center of the command ship buzzed with quiet activity. Han Ji-won had become the fleet's chief strategist, and her reputation for turning disasters into victories was known throughout the refugee networks. The patrol pattern in Sector 7 has changed, she explained to a group of ship captains. The Vektari are using a new search algorithm, but it has a weakness. They assume we'll run from superior forces. She activated a holographic display, showing ship movements through space. Red dots represented Vektari patrols. Blue dots showed safe routes through their coverage. Instead of running, we're going to dance. Small groups of our fastest ships will appear at the edge of sensor range, then vanish. The Vektari will chase phantom contacts while our main fleet moves through the gaps in their formation. Captain Song Hyunwoo raised a concern. What if they adapt to our tactics? Han Ji-won smiled. Then we'll adapt faster. That's what humans do. The trading post aboard the merchant ship Wanderer's Rest never closed. Trade negotiator Moon Kyung-soo had built a network of contacts that stretched across known space. His deals weren't based on profit, but on mutual benefit and long-term relationships. The Verdani are offering medical herbs in exchange for protection during their harvest season, he reported to the Fleet Council. The Luminari want to trade energy crystals for passage to the neutral zone. These trades did more than supply the fleet with needed resources. They spread humanity's reputation as fair dealers and reliable partners. In a galaxy where most species took what they wanted by force, humans offered something different. Cooperation that made everyone stronger. Intelligence. Operative Oh Sun-ho returned from a deep cover mission with news that would change everything. He had spent 2 years infiltrating Vektari society, posing as a slave trader from the Outer Rim. The Empire is weaker than we thought, he reported in the secure briefing room. Their military is strong, but their economy is failing. They've conquered so many worlds that they can't effectively govern them all. Rebellions are breaking out faster than they can suppress them. What about their fleet strength? Asked Admiral Ji-ho. He had been promoted as the refugee fleet grew into something resembling a proper navy. Still dangerous, but spread thin. They have maybe 3,000 capital ships, but they're scattered across 500 systems. If we could coordinate simultaneous uprisings in enough sectors, we could break their ability to respond effectively, Ji-ho finished. But that would require allies. Lots of them. Oh, Sun-ho smiled. That's the beautiful part, sir. We already have them. Every refugee group we've helped, every species we've sheltered, every world that's heard our story, they're all waiting for someone to make the first move. Communications officer Shin Woo-jin looked up from his console. Sir, we're receiving a priority message from Scout Team Alpha. They've found something big. The message, when decoded, made everyone in the briefing room sit up straight. Captain Nam Ji-hyun had discovered the location of the surviving Rilani. They were alive, but enslaved on a water world called Kepler Prime, forced to build weapons for their Vektari masters. Admiral, Ji-ho stood slowly, his face set with grim determination. Gather the fleet commanders, it's time to repay our debt. The years of running and hiding were over. Humanity had learned hard lessons in the darkness between stars. They had grown from desperate refugees into something new, a force that could inspire hope in the hopeless and turn scattered outcasts into a unified resistance. The Rilani had died to save them. Now it was time to save the Rilani who still lived. But first, they had to become strong enough to challenge an empire. The hidden base in the Andromeda Nebula hummed with activity that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. What had once been an empty region of space now housed the largest concentration of refugee ships in galactic history. 50 human vessels floated alongside hundreds of others, each representing a different species that had found hope in humanity's promise. Fleet Admiral Park Ji-ho walked through the corridors of the new flagship, a massive vessel built from the combined efforts of 20 different alien technologies. The ship had no name yet. They were waiting for the right moment to christen it, when its purpose became clear to the galaxy. The modifications are complete, sir, reported Chief Engineer Lee Min-ho as they entered the engineering section. Every ship in the fleet has been upgraded with the new systems. Jiho looked at the displays showing power readings that should have been impossible. Minho had somehow convinced physics to bend to human stubbornness. Their engines now drew energy from the quantum foam itself. Their weapons could turn enemy fire into harmless light shows. Their shields actually grew stronger when attacked. How do they work? Jiho asked, though he knew the answer would make his head hurt. Minho grinned. They work because we need them to work. The universe is more flexible than most people realize. You just have to ask nicely and be ready to give something back. That was typical human engineering. Where other species followed rigid scientific laws, humans treated those laws more like friendly suggestions. The results were ships that operated on hope and determination as much as fuel and machinery. Battle Coordinator Kwon Min-seok joined them at the tactical display. He had spent months planning what they called the Reckoning, humanity's attempt to honor their debt to the Rilani. But the plan had grown into something much larger. The coalition ships are taking their positions. Min-seok reported. The Zephyrians have 40 vessels ready. The Verdani brought their entire merchant fleet. Even the Luminari have agreed to provide support, though they still don't understand why we're doing this. Because someone has to, Jiho said simply. The galaxy has forgotten that kindness deserves kindness in return. We're going to remind them. In the medical bay, Dr. Kim Sora worked with healing techniques that combined science with something approaching magic. She could now treat not just diseases and injuries, but the deeper wounds that slavery and oppression left on a being's soul. The Yomao, rescued Vectari defectors are responding well to treatment, she told her assistant. A plant like Verdani whose leaves change color based on her emotions. Physical healing is easy compared to helping them remember who they were before the Empire consumed their identity. The defectors were an unexpected development. Word of humanity's growing coalition had spread even into Vectari space, inspiring some of their own citizens to abandon the Empire and seek refuge with the rebels. Each defector brought valuable intelligence about Vectari weaknesses and internal conflicts. Diplomatic Corps leader Kil Hana stood before an assembly that would have been impossible to imagine 10 years ago. Representatives of 30 different species sat together in the same room, discussing coordinated military action against the galaxy's most powerful empire. The Vectari expect us to fight like them, she explained to the gathered delegates. Ship against ship, strength against strength. But we're not going to give them the war they understand. A Zephyrian representative, its mechanical voice synthesized through a translation matrix, asked the obvious question. What kind of war will we give them? A human war, Kil Hana replied. We're going to fight them with hope. The plan was insane, by conventional military standards. Instead of attacking Vectari strongholds, they would target their weaknesses. Instead of destroying their fleets, they would turn them. Instead of conquering worlds, they would liberate them, Intelligence Chief. Oh Sunho had returned from Kepler Prime with detailed maps of the Rilani prison facilities. But he had also brought something more valuable, proof that the Vectari Empire was already cracking from within. Rebellion is spreading through their core worlds, he reported to the War Council. The Vectari people are tired of endless conquest. They remember when their species valued honor and family instead of domination and fear. How many of them would join us if given the chance? Asked Admiral Jiho. More than we can handle, Oh Sunho replied. The Empire's greatest weakness is that most of its citizens never wanted to be an empire in the first place. That intelligence changed everything. The rescue mission for the Rilani became the opening move in a campaign to free the entire galaxy from tyranny. But it would require perfect timing and coordination across hundreds of star systems. Scout Captain Nam Ji-hyun arrived with the final piece of the puzzle. Her ship, the Swift Current, had just completed a reconnaissance mission that took her deep into Vectari space. The slave facilities on Kepler Prime are more heavily defended than we thought, she reported. But they have a weakness. The Vectari are so confident in their control that they've never considered the possibility of a rescue attempt. What kind of defenses are we looking at? Asked Battle Coordinator Min-seok. Orbital platforms, patrol fleets, ground-based weapons. Everything designed to keep people in. Nothing optimized to keep attackers out. They're prepared for a slave uprising, not an invasion. Weapons specialist Zhang Yunji had been quiet during most of the planning sessions, but now she spoke up. What if we don't invade? What if we just knock on the front door and ask them to let the Rilani go? The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her as if she had suggested flying directly into a star. Explain, Admiral Jiho said carefully. Yunji activated a holographic display showing Kepler Prime's defensive systems. Look at their setup. It's all about maintaining control through fear and overwhelming force. But what happens when someone shows up who isn't afraid and doesn't fight back the way they expect? She highlighted key points in the Vektari defensive network. Their weapons are designed to destroy attacking fleets. Their sensors look for standard military formations. Their commanders are trained to respond to conventional tactics. We're not conventional, Jiho realized. Exactly. We show up with our entire coalition fleet, broadcast our intentions openly, and give them a chance to do the right thing. When they refuse, we don't attack their defenses. We ignore them completely and focus on getting our people out. Strategic planner Han Jiwan began working out the details. A diversionary force draws their attention to the orbital defenses while infiltration teams reach the surface. But instead of fighting our way to the prison facilities, we broadcast directly to the Rilani inside. Tell them help has arrived. Communications Officer Shin Wujin added, understanding the plan. Give them hope and the means to help themselves. The psychological impact on the Vektari forces will be devastating, observed Psychological Operations Specialist Ryu Jinhua. They've spent years convinced that their prisoners are broken and helpless. Seeing organized resistance from people they thought were defeated will shake their confidence. The plan took shape over weeks of careful preparation. Every ship would have a role. Every species in the coalition would contribute their unique strengths, but the success of the mission would depend on something the Vektari couldn't understand or predict: the power of beings working together instead of fighting for dominance. Resource Coordinator Choi Daiho presented the final logistics report. We have enough supplies for a 6-month campaign if necessary. The Allied fleets are fully provisioned. Medical teams are standing by for mass casualty treatment. What about the Rilani themselves? Asked Dr. Sora. 10 years of slavery will have left them physically and mentally damaged. We'll heal them, Jiho promised. All of them. Whatever it takes, however long it requires. The debt to the Rilani will be paid in full. The fleet began moving toward Vektari space like a storm gathering strength. Word of their approach spread through underground networks faster than their ships could travel. On 100 worlds, oppressed beings looked up at the stars and dared to hope that freedom was coming. But the humans knew this mission was about more than rescuing the Rilani. It was about proving that kindness could triumph over cruelty, that cooperation was stronger than domination, and that a debt of gratitude could indeed reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Admiral Jiho stood on the bridge of the still unnamed flagship as they approached the edge of known space. Behind them stretched the largest peacekeeping force in galactic history. Ahead lay the Vektari Empire and the beginning of humanity's greatest test. The storm was gathering. Soon, the galaxy would discover what happened when humans kept their promises. The attack on Kepler Prime began with what looked like a terrible mistake. Scout Captain Nam Ji-hyun led a squadron of 20 small ships directly toward the planet's heaviest orbital defenses, broadcasting human identification codes on all frequencies. Unknown vessels, you are entering restricted Vektari space, came the challenge from the orbital command station. Identify your purpose or be destroyed. Nam Ji-hyun's response was transmitted clearly on all channels so that every Vektari in the system could hear it. This is Captain Nam Ji-hyun of the Human Liberation Fleet. We have come for the Rilani people you hold as slaves. Release them, and we will depart in peace. The Vektari commander's laughter echoed across the communication network. 20 small ships against the entire Kepler Prime defense grid? You humans are either very brave or very stupid. We prefer to think of ourselves as determined, Nam Ji-hyun replied calmly. You have 10 minutes to consider our request. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The Vektari opened fire with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. Energy beams and missile salvos converged on the human ships from every direction. None of the weapons found their targets. The human ships seemed to dance between the incoming fire, moving in patterns that defied physics and probability. Energy. Beams passed through spaces the ships had occupied milliseconds before. Missiles curved away from their targets as if repelled by invisible force fields. But the humans weren't just dodging. Every missed shot that struck empty space triggered something unexpected. Where Vectari energy beams hit nothing, flowers began blooming in hard vacuum. Missiles that missed their targets exploded into clouds of harmless butterflies that somehow survived in the airless environment. "What kind of weapons are those?" demanded the orbital commander. "The same kind of weapons that turn swords into plowshares," Nam Ji-hyun replied cryptically. "Will you reconsider our request?" While the orbital defenses focused on the impossible human squadron, the real rescue was beginning elsewhere. Infiltration specialist Song Hyun-woo led a team of volunteers in ships so small they registered as space debris on Vectari sensors. His team included representatives from 6 different species, each chosen for skills that complemented human ingenuity. They didn't approach Kepler Prime like invaders. They arrived like ghosts, slipping through gaps in the defensive grid that shouldn't have existed. The planet's surface was mostly water, dotted with floating cities that served as Vectari administrative centers. Deep beneath the waves, the Rilani, slave facilities operated in pressurized caverns that had once been beautiful coral gardens. Song Hyun-woo's team didn't break into the facilities. Instead, they knocked on the front door and politely asked to be let in. "I am Song Hyun-woo of the Human Diplomatic Corps," he announced to the facility's security chief. "I am here to conduct a humanitarian inspection of your prisoner population." The Vectari guard looked confused. "This is a restricted military facility. You have no authority here." Song Hyun-woo smiled and produced an official-looking document covered with impressive seals and signatures. Under Article 15 of the Galactic Accords on Prisoner Treatment, neutral parties may inspect detention facilities to ensure compliance with civilized standards. "The Galactic Accords were dissolved 50 years ago," the guard protested. "Yes, but this facility was built 60 years ago, so it still falls under the original treaty obligations," Song Hyun-woo explained with perfect seriousness. "I'm afraid I must insist on conducting my inspection." The guard's training hadn't covered this situation. Faced with an official-sounding human making legal arguments he didn't understand, he did what bureaucrats everywhere do when confused. He called his supervisor. While the Vectari command structure tried to figure out what to do about the polite human with his incomprehensible paperwork, Dr. Kim Sora and her medical team were already inside the facility, ostensibly treating injured prisoners. The Rilani show signs of chronic malnutrition and psychological trauma, she reported to Song Hyun-woo in a voice loud enough for the Vectari guards to hear. "I'm afraid I'll need to administer immediate treatment to prevent further deterioration." What the guards didn't realize was that Dr. Sora's medicine contained more than healing compounds. Each injection carried carefully designed genetic modifications that would activate in the Rilani children, making them immune to Vectari control devices and enhancing their natural telepathic abilities. But the most important component of her treatment was hope itself. As she moved through the facility, she whispered to each Rilani patient in their own language, words that had been forbidden for 10 years. "Remember Kepler Station. Remember the humans who came seeking help. The debt is being repaid. Your people will swim free again." Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Lee Min-ho worked with a team of alien specialists to inspect the weapons manufacturing equipment. To the Vectari supervisors, it looked like a standard safety evaluation. In reality, they were installing hidden modifications in every piece of machinery. "These plasma conduits don't meet standard safety specifications," Min-ho informed the facility manager. "I'm afraid I'll need to make some adjustments to prevent accidents." The adjustments he made were subtle but profound. Every weapon the Rilani were forced to build now contained hidden programming that would recognize human command codes. When activated, the weapons would turn against their Vectari masters and protect any being that carried Rilani genetic markers. Communications. Officer Shin Woo-jin had the most delicate job. While posing as a technical advisor updating the facility's communication systems, he was actually installing a hidden network that would allow the imprisoned Rilani to coordinate with each other and with the rescue fleet above. "Your current system is terribly outdated," he told the Vectari communications chief. "These upgrades will improve efficiency by 30%. The upgrades did improve efficiency, but not in the way the Vectari expected. The new system allowed every Rilani in the facility to hear each other's thoughts and share memories of life before captivity. For the first time in 10 years, they remembered what it felt like to be free." On the planet's surface, psychological. Operations Specialist Ryu Jinhua conducted what appeared to be routine interviews with Vectari personnel. She was officially documenting the facility's operation for bureaucratic purposes. In reality, she was planting seeds of doubt and compassion in minds that had been hardened by years of cruelty. "How do you feel about working with aquatic species?" she asked a young guard during his interview. "Do you ever wonder what their lives were like before they came here?" The questions seemed innocent, but they forced the Vectari to think about their prisoners as individuals rather than resources. Some guards began remembering their own childhoods, when their species valued honor and family instead of conquest and domination. The real genius of the plan became clear when everything was ready. Song Hyunwoo activated a signal that had been hidden in every modification and upgrade his team had made. Suddenly, every weapon in the facility stopped working properly. Energy rifles fired flowers instead of death rays. Security barriers turned into rainbows that prisoners could walk through unharmed, but the most important change was in the Rilani themselves. Dr. Sora's treatment had done more than heal their bodies. It had awakened something that 10 years of slavery couldn't destroy: the will to be free. The prison break didn't look like a violent escape. It looked like a celebration. The Rilani simply walked out of their cells, past guards whose weapons refused to fire, through barriers that had turned transparent. They moved toward the surface like a school of fish following an invisible current. Some Vectari guards tried to stop them manually, but found themselves unable to strike beings who radiated such pure joy at their freedom. Others simply stood aside, remembering what it felt like to help instead of harm. On the surface, Nam Ji-hyun's diversionary attack reached its climax as the orbital defenses finally managed to score a hit on one of her ships. Instead of exploding, the vessel transformed into a massive flower that began seeding the vacuum of space with pollen that somehow survived and thrived without atmosphere. "That's impossible," the orbital commander muttered, staring at sensor readings that made no sense. "Impossible is just another word for haven't figured it out yet," Nam Ji-hyun replied cheerfully. "Now, about those Rilani," the escape pods began, launching from the planet's surface as thousands of freed Rilani made their way to the evacuation points. But they weren't alone. Hundreds of Vectari civilians, inspired by what they had witnessed, chose to abandon their posts and join the exodus. "Why?" asked one Vectari administrator as he boarded a human rescue ship with a group of former prisoners. "Why risk everything for people you barely know?" An elderly Rilani, swimming gracefully in a portable water tank, answered him with words that cut through decades of imperial propaganda. "Because that is what people do when they remember how to be people." The Kepler Prime rescue became a legend that spread through the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. 50,000 Rilani had been freed without firing a single shot, in anger. More importantly, the rescue had demonstrated something the galaxy had forgotten: that compassion backed by determination could accomplish what violence never could. As the rescue fleet departed Kepler Prime, the rescue of the Rilani became a spark that ignited something the galaxy had never seen before. Within 6 months, peaceful revolutions were breaking out across 17 different star systems. But these weren't violent uprisings. They were something far more dangerous to tyrants everywhere: people simply refusing to be afraid anymore. Cultural anthropologist Lim Soyeon documented the phenomenon from the mobile research station Bright Hope as it traveled from world to world. Her reports painted a picture of transformation that defied every model of political change known to galactic civilization. The pattern is consistent across all affected systems, she explained to Admiral Jiho during their weekly briefing. It starts with someone telling the story of what happened at Kepler Prime. Within days, local populations begin organizing cooperative support networks. Within weeks, entire planets are restructuring their governments based on mutual aid instead of hierarchical control. And the Vectari response? Jiho asked. That's the truly remarkable part. They keep sending military forces to crush the rebellions, but the forces keep defecting instead. It's impossible to fight an enemy that welcomes you with open arms and offers to help solve your problems. The transformation was most visible in the trade routes that connected the galaxy's major civilizations. Economic advisor Park Min-young had established new trading networks based on the principles humanity had learned during their years in exile. Mutual benefit created stronger relationships than exploitation. Traditional galactic commerce is collapsing, she reported from the merchant vessel Golden Current. When beings discover they can trade fairly instead of taking advantage of each other, the old system stops making sense. Her innovations had created something unprecedented, a galactic economy based on trust instead of fear. Worlds that had been enemies for centuries began exchanging goods, services, and knowledge. The Vectari Empire found itself increasingly isolated as former subjects and allies chose cooperation over conquest. Defense Coordinator An Seong-min faced the challenging task of protecting this growing network of free worlds without becoming the very thing they opposed. His solution was typically human. Instead of building weapons to destroy enemies, he created shields to protect friends. The Sanctuary Protocol is now operational in 47 star systems, he reported during a strategy meeting aboard the flagship Kepler's Dream. Any species facing extinction can request protection, and we'll have response teams deployed within 72 hours. The protocol had been tested dozens of times as the Vectari Empire tried to punish worlds that had joined the human alliance. But instead of military confrontations, these encounters became demonstrations of defensive technology that turned attacks into harmless light shows. The psychological impact on Vectari forces is profound, observed fleet psychologist Dr. Yun Cheong. They're trained to fight enemies who fight back. When their weapons produce flowers instead of explosions, it breaks down their conditioning. Intelligence Chief Oh Soon-ho returned from a deep reconnaissance mission with news that would reshape their understanding of the galactic situation. His report changed everything. The Vectari Empire is collapsing faster than anyone predicted, he announced to the War Council. It's not military pressure causing the breakdown, it's philosophical confusion. He activated a holographic display showing Vectari communication intercepts from across their territory. The messages painted a picture of an empire eating itself from within. Their entire social structure is based on the idea that strength comes from domination. But everywhere they look, they see humans and their allies achieving impossible things through cooperation. It's creating a crisis of faith that's spreading through every level of their society. Admiral Jiho studied the intelligence reports with growing amazement. They're not losing battles. They're losing the will to fight. Exactly. When you build an empire on the premise that might makes right, what happens when someone proves that kindness makes you stronger? Their core beliefs are crumbling. The evidence was everywhere. Vectari worlds were declaring independence not through violent revolution, but by simply announcing they didn't want to be part of the empire anymore. Vectari fleets were arriving at battlefields, only to find that their opponents wanted to negotiate instead of fight. Communications officer Shin Woo-jin had expanded his network to cover 3/4 of known space. His report showed a galaxy in the midst of unprecedented change. We're receiving cooperation requests from species that have been at war for millennia, he reported. The Hegemony of Steel and the Crystal Collective just signed a mutual aid pact. The Void Hunters have offered to share their territory with refugee populations. The most remarkable development was happening within Vectari space itself. Their own citizens were abandoning imperial worlds in massive numbers, seeking new homes in the growing alliance of free systems. Dr. Kim Sora found herself treating not just physical ailments, but the deeper wounds left by decades of living under authoritarian rule. Her mobile hospitals became centers of healing that went far beyond medicine. The Vectari refugees are the most challenging cases, she explained to her medical staff. They've spent generations believing that strength means making others weak. Learning to find strength in helping others is traumatic for minds shaped by imperial ideology. But the healing was working. Former Vectari soldiers became some of the most effective advocates for the human way of life. Their testimony carried special weight because they had lived under both systems and could speak to the difference. The transformation wasn't limited to politics and economics. Science itself was evolving as species began sharing knowledge freely instead of hoarding it for competitive advantage. Engineer Lee Minho found himself coordinating research projects that involved hundreds of different alien technologies working in harmony. We've achieved breakthrough discoveries in 17 different fields this month alone, he reported with barely contained excitement. When you combine Zephyrian mechanical precision with Verdani biological adaptability and human stubbornness, the results are extraordinary. His workshops had become laboratories where impossible things became routine. Weapons that turned violence into art, engines that ran on hope and determination, medical devices that healed trauma to the soul as well as the body. Strategic planner. Han Jiwan faced the unprecedented challenge of coordinating defensive strategies for an alliance that grew larger every day. Her solution was to turn defense into a form of education. Instead of hiding our capabilities, we demonstrate them openly, she explained to allied military commanders. Every defensive action becomes a teaching moment that shows potential enemies there's a better way. The strategy was working beyond their wildest expectations. Vectari attack forces were arriving at target systems only to find themselves surrounded by beings who offered to help solve their problems instead of fighting them. Trade negotiator Moon Kyung-soo established markets where beings could exchange, not just goods and services, but ideas and cultural expressions. His trading post became centers of learning, where former enemies discovered they had more in common than they had ever realized. The economic transformation is accelerating, he reported. When people start trading stories and songs along with food and technology, they stop seeing each other as threats and start seeing each other as friends. The Vectari High Command watched their empire dissolve with growing desperation. Their attempts to stop the spread of human influence only made it stronger. Every military action backfired as their own forces were converted to the cause of cooperation. Intelligence reports indicated that the Vectari leadership was preparing for a final desperate gamble. They were gathering every remaining loyal ship and soldier for a massive assault on the human home fleet. It would be the largest military force assembled in galactic history, commanded by the Emperor himself. They're planning to end this with one overwhelming attack, Oh Sunho warned the Alliance leadership. Every ship they have left, every weapon in their arsenal concentrated in a single battle. Admiral Jiho looked around the conference room at the representatives of 40 different species who had joined humanity's cause. Then we'll give them the battle they want, but not the kind of battle they expect. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. But the humans had learned something during their years of exile that the Vectari Empire had never understood. The most powerful force in the universe wasn't hatred or fear. It was the simple recognition that every being in the galaxy, no matter how lost or bitter, was someone's child who deserved a chance to remember what it meant to be good. The final battle would not be fought with weapons. It would be fought with memories of what the galaxy could become when its children chose love over fear. The convergence point had been chosen as the site for the final battle because all major hyperspace routes passed through it. When the Vectari assembled their fleet there, every civilization in the galaxy would know that the old order was making its last stand. Admiral Park Jiho stood on the bridge of the flagship Kepler's Dream as 10,000 Vectari warships emerged from hyperspace. It was the largest military force ever assembled, carrying enough firepower to reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust. Facing them were the 50 ships of the original human fleet, plus 300 vessels from allied species. By every measure of military strength, it should have been a massacre. Sir, the Vectari fleet is powering weapons, reported Tactical Officer Kwon Min-sok. They're targeting our flagship. Open all communication channels, Jiho ordered. I want every ship in both fleets to hear this. The comm system activated, broadcasting on every frequency used by civilized space. When Jiho spoke, his words reached not just the assembled fleets but monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Vektari Fleet, this is Admiral Park Jiho of the Human Alliance. We know you've come here to destroy us. Before you begin, we'd like to invite you to dinner. The silence that followed stretched across space like a held breath. Then Emperor Vexthul himself responded, his voice carrying the accumulated bitterness of a being who had ruled through fear for 2 centuries. You mock us, human. You think your tricks will work against the concentrated might of the Empire? No tricks, Your Majesty. Just an honest invitation to share a meal and hear some stories. We've learned so much about your people during our travels. We'd like to tell you what we've discovered. Instead of firing weapons, the human fleet began projecting massive holographic displays into the space between the 2 forces. But these weren't battle plans or tactical information. They were family portraits. Thousands of images appeared in the void. Vektari children playing in gardens that no longer existed. Vektari families celebrating festivals that had been banned for generations. Vektari artists creating beauty that had been declared weakness by imperial doctrine. We remember your children too, Jiho said softly, his words carrying across the communication network to both fleets. We know about the poetry of Velkara the Dreamer, banned because it spoke of peace. We know about the music of the Zeth Collective, silenced, because it made people dance together instead of march apart. More images appeared. Dr. Kim Sora had spent years documenting the cultural treasures that the Vektari Empire had tried to erase from its own history. Medical records showing genetic damage caused by generations of chemical weapons used on their own colonies. Archaeological evidence of Vektari civilizations that had valued cooperation and art before the Empire consumed them. Your ancestors were explorers and teachers, continued Jiho. They built the first peaceful trade routes through the Spiral Nebula. They created the universal translation protocol that lets different species communicate. They were the first to prove that faster than light, travel was possible without destroying the fabric of space-time itself. Engineer Lee Minho activated the next phase of the display. Technical specifications appeared showing Vektari innovations that had made galactic civilization possible. Peaceful technologies that had been perverted into weapons of conquest. We've brought some gifts, Minho announced on the fleet-wide channel. Medical nanobots that can repair the genetic damage in your home systems. Terraforming technology that could restore the worlds your empire poisoned. Agricultural systems that could end the famines on your outer colonies. Ships began launching from the human fleet, but they weren't fighters or bombers. They were cargo vessels filled with supplies and medical equipment. Each ship broadcast its manifest openly. Food, medicine, technology, and something the Vektari hadn't seen in generations. Hope. The Vektari fleet commanders found themselves in an impossible situation. Their orders were clear: destroy the Human Alliance. But their targets were offering them gifts instead of firing weapons. Communications officer Shin Woo-jin began broadcasting something that shattered the resolve of hardened warriors. Personal. Messages from Vektari defectors to the families they had left behind. Mother, this is your son Kethamul, came one message. I know the Empire told you I was dead, I'm alive, and I'm free. The humans taught me to remember who I was before the conditioning. I remember the lullabies you sang when the storms came. I remember how you taught me that strength comes from protecting others, not hurting them. Hundreds of similar messages followed. Children speaking to parents, parents reaching out to children, families torn apart by imperial doctrine, trying to heal wounds that had festered for decades. Some Vektari ships began standing down, not in surrender, but in recognition. Their crews were remembering things they had been taught to forget. Emperor. Vexthul watched his fleet waver and felt rage consuming him. He had built his rule on the principle that only the strong deserved to survive. The human display of weakness disgusted him. Pathetic, he broadcast to his fleet. They offer gifts to those who come to destroy them. They show mercy to enemies. This is why the weak deserve to be conquered. He activated his flagship's primary weapons and fired directly at the Kepler's Dream. The energy beam should have vaporized the human vessel instantly. Instead, it struck the ship's shields and transformed into a cascade of butterflies that somehow survived in vacuum. Thousands of delicate creatures danced around both fleets, their wings catching and reflecting starlight in patterns of impossible beauty. "Your weapons have forgotten how to hate," Admiral Jiho said gently. "Even your machines remember what you once were." The Emperor's fury reached a breaking point. He activated his personal combat systems and challenged Jiho to single combat, ship to ship, leader to leader. "You want to save your fleet?" Vexathul snarled. "Face me alone. Winner takes all." Jiho accepted without hesitation. The two flagships moved into a clear area of space while both fleets watched. What followed wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. The Emperor attacked with every weapon system his ship possessed. Energy cannons, missile salvos, exotic matter torpedoes, all the destructive power that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Jiho didn't fire back. Instead, his ship projected images around the Emperor's vessel, memories of who Vexthul had been, before power corrupted him. A young Vectari scientist who had dreamed of exploring distant stars, a father who had sung his children to sleep, a being who had once believed that knowledge was more precious than conquest. "I know who you are." "Jiho,"